just don't know how to smoke it, man. I came out smoking, man. I could smoke meat truck. I probably smoke this all the time, man. I wouldn't even...
Critics called him lewd, sexist, and racist, and those were the tame reviews. Cheech and Chong managed to offend just about everybody, and in the process, the outrageous comedians laughed all the way to the bank.
Can't grab you by the poo-poo, don't it?
They're like two Shakespearean characters that were living in the Renaissance of the 70s.
Cheech Marin and Tommy Chong took any taboo, no matter how outrageous.
Hey, I'll check it out here,
And did it with a toke and a smile.
Hey, brother, your ass is gonna cave in, man.
Cheech and Chong went from a club act to the biggest comedy team since Martin and Lewis.
In the next hour, we'll meet these incredible funny men in exclusive interviews.
He goes, hey man, why don't you do the guy in the car as a lowrider? And I go,
well, it's kind of derogatory, you know, toward Mexicans. I said, good, man, that's what we're looking for.
We'll look at two dramatically different individuals and what made them tick.
Like all Latin men in the House of Women, he was pampered.
Tommy's never been like he's Chinese. He's always been like he was something that he's not.
We'll go to the Ramshackle nightclub in Canada, where an unlikely alliance changed the face of comedy.
we both had the same thought when we saw each other. What are you?
We'll follow the trail south, where the two jesters clawed their way up the comedy ladder.
They were stoned when they went up on stage, and then they came off stage and they weren't stoned anymore.
And we will witness two unlikely movie stars light Hollywood up in smoke to the tune of more than $300 million.
Directing Cheech and Chong, you know, all you can do is really say, you guys ready?
And finally, we'll learn why, after 17 years together, the hippest comedy duo in history went their separate ways.
Cheech's comment was always, I'm not going back until hell freezes over.
Abbott and Costello, Laurel and Hardy, Hope and Crosby, legendary comedy teams that did not approach the financial success of two scruffy-looking underdogs only a mother could love. This is their story. Cheech and Chong, the true Hollywood story.
Her life's ambition was to be a star. Could never recover from the public scandal.
Summer 1978. After a decade together, Cheech and Chong were among the most successful comedy teams ever.
Is everybody stoned?
Their cutting-edge live act treaded on forbidden ground. They had gold albums, a hit movie, and a multi-picture deal. Soulmates in comedy, but utterly different men. Thomas B. Kin Chong was born in Edmonton, Canada on May 24, 1938. Tommy was the second son of Chinese immigrant Stan Chong Sr. and Scottish-Irish mother Jean. In 1944, when Tommy was 6, the family moved to Calgary, where Chong's father worked as a truck driver, supporting his family and half the neighborhood. Brother Stan Chong Jr.
We had one of the original open-door policies. We had kids from all areas stay overnight. No one was ever rejected at our house.
1,500 miles south, in the Watts section of Los Angeles, California, Elsa Marin gave birth to a son, Richard Anthony Marin. The date was July 13, 1946. Richard was the only boy in a Catholic family that included 3 sisters. Marin's father, Oscar, was a Los Angeles police detective.
He was not going kid. This is especially true in grammar school, where he became more or less of a pest to the teachers.
Cheech Marin.
I was a teacher's worst nightmare. I was a wise ass that got straight A's. So they couldn't mess with me.
Richard took advantage of his proximity to Hollywood.
Yeah, I was on Art Linkletter when I was a kid, his radio show. I was on Thunderbolt the Wonderful, Webster Webfoot, and I used to sing. That's how I got in the business. I made my first record when I was 5. I was the big cheese in the neighborhood.
While young Richard engaged in thespian pursuits in L.A., Tommy Chong gravitated to music. In 1952, the 14-year-old dropped out of high school and started his own band, Tommy Chong.
we formed a group called the Shades because of the different colors, you know. We had Indian and half Chinese and a Canadian black.
A curious teen, Chong was in constant search of new stimulus.
I got turned on in Calgary, you know. That was my first experience with pot, you know, and with humor. You know, Lenny Bruce record. It changed my life.
Tommy's life changed again in 1955 when the 17-year-old met and fell for 14-year-old Maxine Sneed. Both Chong and Shade's lead singer Tommy Milton were developing into smooth ladies' men.
Tommy and I had this little arrangement, you know. Tommy, he liked all the white girls, and I liked all the black girls.
In 1960, a brief affair with another black girl, 17-year-old Gail Lewis, produced a daughter, Ray Dawn Chong, born on February 1st, 1960.
Maxine basically took it in stride. When Ray Dawn was born, Gail could not look after her, so my mom and dad took Ray Dawn and raised her.
It wasn't a shock by any means, you know. I was like a black blues guitar player. It was like, it's part of the culture, you know. A lot of illegitimate kids.
In 1961, 23-year-old Chong changed the name of his band to Little Daddy and the Bachelors. The title was prophetic. That summer, Chong officially adopted Ray Dawn, then married his girlfriend, 20-year-old Maxine Sneed, who stepped in as Mommy. On May 28, 1964, another daughter, Robbie, was born.
It was one of those marriages where, I mean, we loved each other from childhood, but it was a childhood sweetheart thing.
As the 60s hit the halfway mark, both Thomas Chong and Richard Marin were traveling markedly different paths. Richard entered Cal State Northridge as an English major and fraternity pledge, with plans to go to law school. Tommy was a father and musician, playing the Canadian R&B scene. But the two men would soon meet, ironically because of a conflict on the other side of the world. Coming up, Richard Marin heads for the Great White North.
I was shocked when all of a sudden he disappears.
And later, Cheech and Chong light up Hollywood.
And it's like these two guys and they smoke a lot of dope. Well, what's the story there?
By 1964, 26-year-old Tommy Chong was married, the father of two girls, and struggling to survive as a musician in Western Canada. In Los Angeles, 18-year-old Richard Marin was college-bound. But a twist of fate would soon unite the two free spirits and create one dynamic team.
I'll tell you about Cheech and Chong. They just happened, innocently and genuinely and purely.
In 1965, 19-year-old Richard Marin was settling into his sophomore year in college. 27-year-old Tommy Chong was a man in transition. His marriage to Maxine was on the rocks. A new girl, 15-year-old Shelby Fittis, had come into the picture. And Tommy's music career stalled. So Chong rounded up the band and headed to San Francisco, where he ran into musician Bobby Taylor.
He wanted me to start a band with the nucleus of the guys that I'd met. Within 6 months, there was nobody could touch us. I mean, nobody.
Chong, 27, and Taylor, 30, formed Bobby Taylor and the Vancouvers. The quintet performed up and down the West Coast before returning to Vancouver, where the Chong family leased a musty old nightclub called the Elegant Parlor.
We were the house band. We, you know, it was our club, our house. And we got so good that the club that would bring in the Supremes and bring in the Frank Sinatras and bring in those other big acts would call us up and ask us to open for these acts.
In 1966, Motown Records honcho Berry Gordy caught wind of the hoopla and signed the group to a contract. The band moved to Detroit, and Chong secretly brought his now pregnant girlfriend Shelby along. Tommy's wife Maxine and the kids stayed behind in Vancouver.
Maxine was not a dummy. It may have been her choice not to do anything about it at that particular time, but she knew.
On March 28, 1967, Shelby gave birth to Precious Chong, Tommy's third daughter by 3 different women. The latest drama inspired the 29-year-old guitar player to write the group's first song.
I'd never written songs before. And so I wrote a song called Does Your Mama Know About Me?
I hated the song. I literally hated that song. And this is why I have so much respect for Berry Gordy. When he heard it, he said, that's a smash. That's a smash. Chewing that tongue. And I said, yeah, sure. And no kidding, they jumped on the charts before we knew it.
As Chong tasted success, 21-year-old Richard Marin faced a moment of truth. The escalating war in Vietnam had opened Marin's eyes and mind to the cultural revolution on campuses across the U.S.
We'd done a lot of protesting at the draft centers and causing disturbances. And I joined the draft resistance movement and handed in my card.
A few credits shy of his degree in English from Cal State Northridge, Marin dropped out of college.
I was shocked when all of a sudden he disappears, and I received a letter later that he was in Canada.
Richard found work as a potter's apprentice in the magnificent but remote Canadian Rockies.
He'd never been into such an environment before. He was living in a cabin. He had to cook his meals over a wood stove. He had to chop his own wood and fetch his own water, chop a hole in the ice to get a bucket of water and bring it back.
As Marin hid in the deep woods, Chong's gig with Motown ended, and Tommy, girlfriend Shelby, and their daughter returned to Vancouver. During his travels, Chong's family had opened another club, a strip joint called the Shanghai Junk. Business was lousy, so Tommy added a twist.
We started doing the Topless Review / improv group. We were called the City Works, and we would do these skits that I picked up from the Second City.
By the summer of 1968, 22-year-old Richard Marin had enough of life in the sticks. He caught a bus to Vancouver, where he wandered into the Shanghai Junk. Chong's combination of topless women, comedy skits, and improv fascinated Marin, and he approached Tommy after the show.
And there was this guy that looked like Genghis Khan Chinese biker, had really long hair and like a Fu Manchu kind of wispy mustache.
Called himself Rich. No mustache. He looks much like he looks now, you know. Little straight hair, little short hair, little straight, little sweaters.
He's wearing these leather pants and a nylon tank top, you know. It was like really cheesy.
And all the girls, you know, they were like, you know, all the topless girls. What is he? You know, is he Indian?
We both had the same thought when we saw each other. Says, what are you? You know, because I didn't know what he was, and he'd never seen a Mexican before.
The two characters hit it off, and Chong offered Marin $60 a week to join the City Works troupe.
Richard, you know, he sort of fit in. He started doing the little straight bits. Then he started doing, you know, bits on his own that, you know, that he would come up with. And he was like a junior partner.
But within months, the troupe split up and everyone scattered, except Richard and Tommy. In 1969, Marin and Chong got some musicians together and entered a battle of the bands. They started the set with some improv humor to loosen up the crowd. An hour and many jokes later, the audience was still laughing. The pair won the competition without playing a note.
No one had ever done that, you know, with that rock and roll crowd like that before. So I knew, I said, wow, you know, we got something here, you know, just the two of us.
Marin and Chong put music on the back burner. Instead, they focused on the laughs and a new identity.
And so we started tossing names around, Richard and Tommy, Chong and Marin. Didn't work out. I said, don't you have a nickname? And he said, yeah, Cheech. Chicharron, you know, the little pig things, the little dried things that you eat. That's what he looked like when he was a baby, so that's why they called him Cheech. So I said, Cheech and Chong. He said, great. And that's what it was.
All right.
Coming up, Cheech and Chong in La La Land.
You only need a little bit of that, man. Hey, brother, your ass is gonna cave in, man.
In 1968, 22-year-old draft dodger Richard Marin teamed up with Thomas Chong, a 30-year-old father of three, in a drugged-out comedy burlesque show in Vancouver, Canada. The two became Cheech and Chong, and a year later, the team made their way south.
It got really desperate. No money. We were struggling. We were struggling.
In 1970, Cheech Marin, 24, and Tommy Chong, 32, rolled into Southern California with high hopes, little money, and no place to stay. Tommy called his estranged wife, Maxine, who was living in L.A.
Hi, here we are. We're going to stay here for a little while, and I'm going to sleep, and he's going to sleep on the couch. Maxine gave us the stink eye, and all right.
Cheech and Chong went looking for stand-up gigs. Cheech's cousin, Patty Robles.
Maybe it was in areas that we thought were kind of, little dives, but we're just so excited that he would be on any kind of stage and that people would be watching him perform.
We'd travel around on clubs that would have us, And the black clubs were great because they'd pay us.
The hip duo soon developed an underground following, opening for such acts as Ray Charles, Stevie Wonder, and Marvin Gaye. Then one night in 1971, Cheech and Chong struck comedy gold.
I says, isn't there a character you could do that, that these people could relate to? And he said, yeah, there's one, but I don't want to do it. I said, why? He said, well, it's kind of derogatory, toward Mexicans. I said, good, man, that's what we're looking for. The minute he opens his mouth and says,
Hey, Red Freak, want all right?
the crowd just went nuts.
And I think I heard somebody drop a glass in the bar, and the bartender laughed, and all of a sudden, and the waitresses turned around, and all the guys from the other band started laughing.
Cheech's character was Pedro, and Chong knew just the right partner to complement the fast-talking Chicano.
There was a kid in Vancouver I met when we had the improv club, and when we'd do a skit that didn't go over, he'd bust us. He'd say, oh man, that sucked. No one laughed at that, man.
Wow.
I never even had a name for him. We just called him man because every second word was, hey, man.
Oh, my stupid dog ate all my weed, man.
The pot-filtered observations of Pedro and the Man and the never-ending search for the perfect buzz became the core of Cheech and Chong's comedy act.
Took me 3 days to get it back.
Cheech's mother, Elsa Marin.
I go, oh my God, how could he be saying those things? How could he be doing those things?
Phil Greenlee was lighting director for the Ice House Comedy Club in the 70s.
It was like, okay, they were straight when they walked in the door, and then they were stoned when they went up on stage, and then they came off stage and they weren't stoned anymore. It was like, what's an act and what's real?
What was real was Cheech and Chong's desire to succeed. Following an open mic performance at West Hollywood's Troubadour Club, Richard and Tommy were approached by record producer Lou Adler. Adler was behind the success of the Mamas and the Papas and later the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Lou signed Cheech and Chong to his Ode Records label and became their producer, then advanced the duo $2,000 to record a comedy album. The very first session produced an instant classic.
So we're rehearsing. Cheech is going to go outside the door and knock on the door, and I'm going to let him in.
It was like boiling outside, and sitting in this air-conditioned room.
So he knocked on the door, and I said, who is it? And he said, it's me, man. I got the stuff. Let me in.
So I knock on the door again. Maybe he didn't hear me. Who is it? It's Dave, man.
So I just waited again to see how long it would be before he had knocked. And so then he knocked, and he knocked a little harder this time. And so I said again, who is it?
Dave? Yeah, Dave, open up.
Then I said, Dave's not here.
And he is just inside rolling, and he's just with me, man.
He got so mad, started kicking. I'm Dave, man.
The album, Cheech and Chong, was released in 1971, and Dave was a breakout single. Syndicated radio host Dr. Demento.
Dave was a drugged-out version of Who's On First. That was a stroke of genius. There'd never been anything like that before on comedy records.
By early 1972, 26-year-old Cheech Marin and 34-year-old Tommy Chong took their show on the road, opening for rock bands, playing outdoor festivals, and even prisons.
We were always sent in when they were having a lot of disturbances. There's been 19 knifings in Soledad. We're going to send in Cheech and Chong.
In the summer of '72, Cheech and Chong released their second album, Big Bamboo. Inside was the LP and a king-sized rolling paper. The album included a single inspired by Cheech's Catholic school experience.
Well, Sister Mary Elephant comes from a nun that was one of our teachers. She'll go nameless. But she was this very large woman who her presence was so huge, and she would yell a lot, and boy, and it would just make her teeth rattle.
Class, 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 shut up! Thank you. It was perfect. And my school memory was always, first I got up, then I went downtown to look for a job. Then I hung out in front of the drugstore.
Big Bamboo became one of the best-selling comedy records ever, with more than 500,000 albums sold. Cheech and Chong became known as the kings of dope humor. But while the minstrels of marijuana were not exactly choir boys, neither were they abusers.
It may ruin his image a bit, but he doesn't do as much dope as what people think that he does.
Both Tommy and Richard were health advocates. They were working out with weights and watching their food diet.
By perpetuating the drug myth, however, Cheech and Chong thumbed their noses at the establishment and struck a note with their fast-growing legion of fans. The comedians tackled issues no one else dared touch, and did so with vigor. As the comedy team's popularity exploded, so did their earning power. In 1972, they accepted a full-year booking at the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas. The payout? $15,000 per show.
There would be a guy in the lobby, you know, and people would come and go and they'd say, okay, yeah, you, Wayne Newton, you, Cheech and Chong. He would just kind of look at him, point, you know, go that way, because it was really obvious the disparity in the audience.
Overnight, the comedians were flush with cash. Chong bought a house in Venice Beach, while Cheech lived up the coast in trendy Malibu.
By the mid-'70s, everybody knew that there was a lot of money to be made in appealing to the counterculture. So they rode the crest of that wave.
Between 1973 and 1976, Cheech and Chong produced 3 more successful albums. Chong finalized his divorce to Maxine, and Tommy and Shelby got married and had their first son, Paris. Cheech also fell in love. On November 11, 1975, Marin married 27-year-old actress-model Darlene Ricky Morley. Personally and professionally, things were falling into place for comedy's most dynamic duo. They had money, fame, and a burning desire to conquer new territory.
But we did make a movie. We made our own movie, man, really. It's called Up in Smoke.
Coming up, unlikely movie stars.
Explain it to us again. That's like these 2 guys and they smoke a lot of dope. What's the story there?
The Jersey Slackers are back. What? And they're on a mission.
Going to Hollywood.
To make a summer blockbuster.
Another white boy in this movie? Dang!
Go behind the scenes of Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. Tomorrow at 7:30, only on E!
In the mid-'70s, after nearly a decade of dizzying success making cutting-edge comedy records, Cheech and Chong were ready to take on Hollywood. But was Hollywood ready for them?
They had all the albums, they came to see the concert tours, but they still didn't get it.
In 1977, 31-year-old Cheech Marin and 39-year-old Tommy Chong were dead set on taking their act to the silver screen.
We had done a lot of concert tours for about 10 years and making albums, and we kind of had exhausted the interest in that for us anyways, and the logical next step was to go to films.
But executives at the major studios weren't listening, convinced that the antics of the pot-smoking pranksters would not play in Peoria.
Well, there was always a problem of, it's not like something we've ever seen before. Explain it to us again. That's like these 2 guys and they smoke a lot of dope. What's the story there?
Lou Adler shopped the duo all over Hollywood. Finally, Adler fronted the money and struck a deal with Paramount.
You know, he was going to set up a movie for us to do. But they wanted him to direct, which was total bull. But we said, okay, I mean, directing Cheech and Chong, all you can do is really say, you guys ready?
Adler directed the film Up in Smoke, which followed the doped-out adventures of Pedro and the Man, Cheech and Chong's most popular characters.
We used to go into a movie with 10 pages outline, 3 pages, because we knew what we were going to do.
The improv approach to filmmaking was unpredictable and very funny. The comics tapped into other characters from their records to create movie mayhem. One in particular, arch nemesis Sergeant Stadenko, had roots that traced back to Chong's days in Vancouver.
Hats, hard hats, give me that. Hello, radio dispatch. This is codenamed Hard Hat. Codenamed Hard Hat. Do you read me? Over.
Was that lard ass?
Hard Hat. Codenamed Hard Hat. Do you read radio dispatch?
Hey, got something for you, lard ass.
Hard Hat. Hard Hat. Do you understand?
Lard ass, lard ass.
Hard Hat. Radio dispatch. Do you know who this is?
No, who is this is?
This is Sergeant Stadenko.
Oh, yeah? You know who this is?
No.
Bye-bye, lard ass.
He was a narc that would bust everybody in sight. His name was Stadenko, Abe Stadenko. And I said, I got to use that guy's name. I'm going to make this guy famous.
Produced for $1 million, Up in Smoke went on to gross more than 100 times that amount worldwide. Cheech and Chong were movie stars, but they grew restless over their management situation.
We signed for the movie deal. We didn't have a lawyer. We had Lou. And he was working very well for us. And so now we were in a different situation. We were tied up in a contract that only allowed us to make movies for him.
In 1979, Cheech and Chong ended their business relationship with Lou Adler, and Cheech and Ricky became parents, adopting infant Carmen. Then in 1980, work began on Universal Studios' production of Cheech and Chong's next movie. The film revolved around more drugged-out antics of Pedro and the Man, and also marked the directorial debut of Tommy Chong, co-star Evelyn Guerrero Morita.
Tommy would replay the videotape, and he'd say, yeah, man, that was funny, keep that one, you know. I mean, we didn't follow the script verbatim, word by word, you know. A lot of it was made up as we went.
Next movie hit big. Then in 1981, as Tommy celebrated the birth of his second son, Gilbron, Cheech and Chong began work on Nice Dreams, their most elaborate film to date. Once again, the team mined familiar turf: drugs. The formula worked. Nice Dreams grossed more than $70 million worldwide. But the success was tainted by dissent. The comedy team clashed over the role of director, the title officially held by Chong.
Cheech and I were starting to have Cheech was having a problem with that, you know, because like I said, he was directing as much as I was, but he wasn't getting the credit for it.
To avoid further trouble, Chong handed over the directorial reins on their following film to editor Tom Alvelson. In 1982, production began on Things Are Tough All Over.
It was more to appease Cheech that somebody else had to come in and direct. And I happened to be there, and they came to me and said, you know, we want you to do it.
Things Are Tough All Over was followed the next year with Still Smokin'. Each film grossed incrementally less than its predecessor, and well below the numbers generated by Cheech and Chong's first 3 movies. Their act, it seemed, was growing stale.
I felt a sense of they were getting tired of playing these parts, especially on Cheech's part. I think he wanted to grow and go on to do other things.
We did Still Smoking, and we did the old act in the movie itself. You know, it was like a sort of our get it on film before we break up.
Coming up.
He wanted to kind of stay in that drug kind of movies, and I just had hooey. Next. By 1983, Cheech Marin and Tommy Chong were at the pinnacle of their success. They had 6 gold albums and generated more than $300 million in film grosses. But rumblings of creative differences pushed their 15-year partnership to the breaking point.
We never did really get that Up in Smoke height again.
In 1984, 38-year-old Cheech and 46-year-old Chong released their 5th film, The Corsican Brothers, a swashbuckling tale set in pre-revolutionary France. For the first time on film, The comedians were not playing the signature characters created for their live act and recordings. The movie was also a departure from their patented drug humor. Cheech allowed Chong one more turn at director.
I tried to direct a movie without any dope in it. You know? I did. But the magic was gone.
The Corsican brothers bombed, and so did Cheech's marriage to Ricky. In 1984, the couple divorced. But the 39-year-old comic's doldrums didn't last long. Marin immediately began dating 32-year-old artist Patty Hyde. And on July 22, 1985, the couple's first son, Joey, was born. Inspired, Cheech developed a new project, a Showtime special called Get Out of My Room.
It was the very start of MTV, and I looked at these things, videos, music, and some of them were funny. I says, that's it. We'll make these little videos. We'll make video albums. What I want to do is make like a mock documentary of us making the album, and I'll direct these videos. And he wasn't into it. He just wasn't into it.
Very proud of being a movie maker. And I felt that going back to doing videos, I felt like we were going in the wrong direction.
The ratings for Get Out of My Room were so-so, but the subsequent soundtrack album fared better. The album included one cut not on the special, a parody of Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA, titled Born in East L.A.
We're going to record the song, and I waited, and no Tommy, and waited, and no Tommy. So finally, I called up, Tommy, hey man, we got the studio, we're going to record. And he says, hey, well, you wrote the song, and it's your song, why don't you just sing it?
Chong had a different recollection.
He wrote the song without me, sang it, you know. And I wasn't included in any of the creative part of it, you know. And so I felt, you know, what do you need me there for?
After the special, the duo cooled their heels until the fall of 1985, when director Martin Scorsese called.
Hi, Cheech, this is Martin Scorsese. Remember me? So yeah, little Italian guy with a beard.
It always was like, we want two guys like Cheech and Chong. And of course, Scorsese said, well, let's get Cheech and Chong.
Cheech and Chong were cast in cameo roles in Scorsese's dark comedy, After Hours. Upon completing the film in New York, Cheech went home to Malibu and Chong caught a plane for France. Without any official announcement, Cheech and Chong split up.
It was burned in my mind, you know. And I've been through it before. With Bobby Taylor, I was through it with other acts, you know, that I've been with, and they quit on me. But it was I never expected it with Cheech.
It's like the syndrome where the younger brother and the older brother, and the younger brother gets old enough, and that dynamic that we had going wasn't working anymore. He didn't want it to let the old relationship go.
Friend Paul Rodriguez.
Cheech said, you know, I want to know if I'm good on my own, you know? And he went on, he made a right and Tommy made a left.
Coming up, feast turns to famine.
I try to kind of shed this indelible image of me as the big mustachioed, dope-smoking lowrider.
In 1985, after more than 15 years together, comedy's most successful team, Cheech and Chong, called it quits. Richard Cheech Marin wanted to explore other avenues. Thomas Chong was perfectly happy with the path that made them America's most lovable potheads.
And there was no real reason to break up other than he was bored.
In 1986, 40-year-old Cheech Marin married 34-year-old girlfriend Patty Hyde and embarked enthusiastically on a solo film career. Marin immediately found the perfect vehicle, The Milagro Beanfield War, a film about migrant farm workers in New Mexico. The story was obscure. The film's director was not. Cheech's lawyer, Stan Coleman.
When it came time for the movie to be made by Robert Redford, Cheech was, of course, called in to read, and he came back a number of times to audition. Finally, after one of the meetings between Redford and Cheech, Redford told Cheech that he had the part.
Marin was ecstatic, but not for long.
It was only a week or so later that we found out that Redford had changed his mind.
Cheech was upset about Redford's decision and the final cut of the film.
That was just a waste of a really good book.
We were supposed to be in it, right?
Yeah.
What happened?
I'm not bitter.
What happened?
He doesn't know from Shinola, that one. 6 major leading Chicano parts. 6. Not one Chicano.
Marin soon bounced back. In 1986, Cheech wrote, directed, and starred in a feature-length motion picture based on his hit song, Born in East L.A. The film scored big, particularly with Latino audiences. Cheech was on his way to solo success, but once again, he hit a roadblock.
He wasn't getting any jobs. After doing Born in East LA, I asked him a lot of times, let's go to the studio, let's try to get another movie together. He says, Paul, they don't want to hear it. I can't get a job.
As Cheech continued to distance himself from his Pedro image, Chong dropped off the radar screen. The 51-year-old disappeared allegedly to the south of France to smoke pot and await his partner's return.
Well, that was everybody's perception. But what I did, I wrote about, maybe 6, 7 scripts. Then I shot a movie called Far Out Man.
In Far Out Man, Chong played a stoned-out hippie from the 60s, dealing with his modern-day family. The 1989 Cinetel production was a total family affair. Chong was writer, director, and star. His wife Shelby, daughters Ray Dawn and Robbie, son Paris, and son-in-law C. Thomas Howell also starred. Old friend Bobby Taylor stepped in as Chong's new sidekick.
She can't carry a tune in a wheelbarrow, man, you know what I mean? I was really honored because, see, I always thought that Cheech was one funny Mexican. You hear me? He was stupidly funny.
The cast and crew got a taste of just how funny when Cheech dropped in one day for a cameo.
What am I doing in this movie, man? I got development deals all over town.
Producers Paul Hertzberg and Lisa Hansen.
They were very funny, cracking jokes the whole day, and obviously 2 people who really cared about each other.
I mean, we had a lot of fun just sitting in the motorhomes, watching the 2 of them just literally, reminisce.
Far Out Man was released in spring of 1990.
But it played well in Italy.
Yeah, it did, actually. Italy loved it.
Just...
They're all potheads in Italy. I don't know.
Over the next few years, Chong hit the stand-up circuit with wife Shelby, and Cheech continued to steer his career toward the mainstream. In 1992, Marin accepted a supporting role in the CBS sitcom Golden Palace. The results were lukewarm, and after 1 season, the series was canceled. In 1993, 47-year-old Cheech Marin once again was creatively adrift.
It was a big, long arc to try to kind of shed this indelible image of me as the big mustachioed, dope-smoking lowrider.
Coming up.
I know there's one more movie, and there's a big paycheck waiting for it.
By 1993, the comedy team of Cheech and Chong were apart for 8 years. 47-year-old Cheech Marin distanced himself from the old act, while 55-year-old Tommy Chong continued to embrace it. But fans of the duo still yearned for a reunion.
I think we both know that we won't ever work again.
On May 8, 1993, Cheech Marin became a father for the 3rd time. While professionally, he made a conscious effort to reinvent himself from his Cheech and Chong persona.
What I did is just persevere and then take any gig that didn't have a big fat joint in it.
Marin's tenacity paid off. Over the next 2 years, Cheech landed solid roles in a series of films, including The Cisco Kid and Desperado. Marin also added some young fans with his voiceover work on Disney's The Lion King and his portrayal of Cheech the school bus driver for none other than ex-producer Lou Adler. But the big break for the comic actor came in 1996 when director Ron Shelton cast Marin opposite Kevin Costner in Tin Cup.
When it came time to cast the caddy in Tin Cup, the first guy who came in was Cheech. I then auditioned 85 other guys, and after I'd gone through the 85, I couldn't get Cheech out of my head.
Tin Cup scored big at the box office. Marin found the niche he was searching for.
From the demise of Cheech and Chong to Tin Cup was 10 years. I mean, it was 10 years of the rent being due every month.
In 1996, Cheech began work on the CBS series Nash Bridges, where he settled comfortably into the role of Detective Joe Dominguez.
I've sung harmony with a lot of guys, whether it be Tommy Chong or Don Johnson or Kevin Costner or Jimmy Smits. You know, that's my forte. I grew up loving sidekicks. They were always the most interesting guys for me.
I hate Nash Bridges because it's always Don Johnson, Don Johnson, Don Johnson, Don Johnson, Cheech, you know.
As Cheech laid down new roots, Chong rediscovered his.
I did the blues. I tried to be black. I tried to be soul man. I found that I'm a funny guy. I can do comedy.
But Tommy felt he was an improv comic who worked better playing off somebody else. So in 1997, the 59-year-old began a search for the new Cheech. What Chong found was that recapturing the magic of Cheech and Chong was like trapping lightning in a bottle.
We had so much fun doing those bits. We couldn't wait. We'd get to the studio and we'd toke up and laugh our ass off.
I always felt that we got handed the torch of the comedy team, from Amos and Andy to Laurel and Hardy and Abbott and Costello.
And that torch lit up and turned on audiences everywhere.
I'm not tremendously wealthy, but what I do have, I owe it to pot. I owe so much to that beautiful herb.
Two unlikely characters with perfect chemistry who carried counterculture cool from shabby nightclubs to the hip masses. Unkept, irresistible, and always unpredictable. Cheech and Chong may just have the last laugh after all.
I know there's one more movie, and there's a big paycheck waiting for us. There's been talk, like $20 million paycheck for a Cheech and Chong movie.
Yeah, I agree with him. I think there is a huge payday out there. I think that we can do a huge movie. It had to be the right movie.
There's only this period of time, you know. A few years from now, it's not going to happen.
I don't know if both of us will be in the same place at the same time. Mentally, I'm wanting to do it and kind of letting everything else go. I don't know if that'll happen.
Fans of Cheech and Chong can only hope and wait.
Come on out, Harry. Harry Palms, let's have a big warm welcome for him. Hey. Harry, thank you very much for coming on the show. Hey, thanks a lot, man. Whoa, what a grip this guy has. Be careful, he'll break your hand, man. He's a professional. Harry, thank you very much for coming on the show, man.